Good morning and welcome to everybody who's signed up for this webinar. This is the first of 3 different webinars that Rogerwilco, Ovatoyou, and Julia Ahlfeldt are hosting. And the intent is to unpack some of the findings of the 2020 South African Digital Customer Experience Report. The report was a piece of research that we ran for the 2nd time this year, really trying to understand some of the complexities and challenges that organizations face when they engage with customers online. For this session on designing customer experience for Omnichannel, we've got a star lineup with panelists from Nestle, Nissan, Shoprite, and the V&A Waterfront. We're going to be introducing all of them in a moment. But before we start, a couple of quick housekeeping aspects. We're going to be recording this session and we'll send a link to everybody in the next few days as soon as the recording has been edited, and we'll probably put it on YouTube. If any of you have got questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A dialogue that you'll find towards the bottom right of your screen. We'll answer the questions towards the end of the session. The intent is that we're going to take you through a couple of slides unpacking some of the primary findings. Then we'll launch into probably about a 45-minute Q&A session. So to kick off, a little bit on our presenters. Julia, perhaps you can introduce yourself. It may be we have lost Julia temporarily. Julia, are you there? Well, Julia, let me introduce Julia. Julia is a customer experience evangelist. She has been working in the customer experience space for many years. She's an accomplished researcher, moderator, and CX specialist. So she's going to be leading the panel discussion today. Mans?
Yeah, so Amanda Reiki, I'm the founder and CEO of Ovatoyou, but also of Imagination Alliance, which is a real world brand strategy and research business, which has been going since 2001. Ovatoyou is a bit of a newer baby, having launched in 2013. And it's a research platform, an online research platform, with a panel of 18,000 respondents. That's me.
Fantastic. Julia, you're back. Perhaps you can introduce yourself briefly.
I am. Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Julia Ahlfeldt. I'm a certified customer experience professional and business advisor, guiding organizations on how to gain market leadership through customer centricity. I'm originally from the United States. You can probably hear from my accent, but I'm now based in Cape Town, and I've worked with blue chip clients such as JP Morgan, American Express, Virgin, Celsi, in order to deliver on their brand promise and foster customer loyalty through great experiences. I try to bring a mix of global and local, leveraging my knowledge of global best practices and understanding the local market to help unite organizations around the customer through things like journey mapping, leadership alignment, and experience design.
Fantastic. And I'm Charlie Stewart. I'm the founder and CEO of Rogerwilco. We're a digitally led marketing agency. Like Julia, I'm not originally from these shores. I grew up in the Highlands of Scotland, but I just loved the sun. And so it was a very easy choice for me to relocate my family down to Cape Town. So let us kick off and give you a little bit of insight around the research.
Yeah, so we've already said that earlier this year we conducted the 2020 South African Digital Customer Experience Survey. We were fortunate enough to get 2,000 online respondents, and we used those findings to develop the report. What's quite nice is you can see that even though we've got a bit of a gender skew, we've got a really good spread of age, race, income, and province.
So I think one of the great conundrums that faces all of us today is, how do we design CX for Omnichannel? I think with the exception of a handful of e-commerce startups, the likes of Yuppie Chef, who had the luxury of beginning with a blank page when they moved into physical selling, most retailers start with bricks and mortar. And that presents huge challenges for their business model as they adapt to delivering a great online experience. But what we've seen in this omnichannel world is that consumers simply don't differentiate between what happens on the internet and what they find when they walk into a physical store. They often baseline the brands that they interact with against the very best experiences that they've had. So if we look at the likes of Uber or Amazon, even though we're in South Africa, those are global entities. Most of us are engaging with them and understanding their platforms and living their wonderful experiences. So it's absolutely crucial that all organizations, be they physical retail or be they traditional bricks and mortar, understand the implications of that. And I think further to that, we've seen that the internet has created this phenomenon of what we call the self-sold customer. These are individuals who do pretty much all of their research online before they start to engage with a brand. So today it's expected that businesses should offer seamless movement between online and physical channels. Indeed, 2/3 of the respondents in our survey said that they prefer to gather information online, but then want to transact in store. So although we've seen, and I think COVID in particular has accelerated a digital adoption and a move to e-commerce, there is still a very, very, very significant majority of South African consumers who enjoy the experience of walking through a physical doorway.
What was interesting in this survey is that it became really apparent that the construction of the offer is actually what's often determining the customer experience. So when we asked respondents the reasons that they abandoned a transaction or where online fails, what they actually came back with were things that were actually quite core to the way the value proposition or the offering was designed. So things like range design, delivery costs and timing are actually quite often cited, and the reason that online is failing. And it became clear that there's an opportunity for businesses that get this right, and also a real threat for those that don't. So one of the things that we determined was that of those who'd abandoned an online purchase, 60% claimed to switch to a competitor retailer's website because that website made it easier for them to buy the product. And that was despite it sometimes being more expensive than their first choice e-tailer. So we all know that consumers don't have, they don't only shop one store, they've got large repertoires, but it was really easy to see very clearly, and that's why we included these screen grabs from respondents' phones, just how easy the switching is to do in the digital world. So customers or respondents were tending to cluster their like-on-like apps. So you've got Uber Eats sitting side by side with Mr. D food, literally a click away, and the same with the retailers in the other screen grabs. So it makes it much easier to switch.
It's clear that customer journeys are not relegated to just the online or the in-person world. We heard this over and over again from consumers. Journeys move between kind of like a myriad of digital and traditional touch points, and brands need to deliver experiences that seamlessly move between them too. COVID has clearly pushed more consumers into the online space, and almost overnight, it forced brands to re-examine the digital aspects of their customer journeys. And it also brought about this kind of reckoning on their ability to deliver journeys. There's no going back to the way things were in November or December of last year. There's only going forward, and brands need to figure out how to navigate the changing needs of consumers. Our research found that online and in-person shopping will increasingly need to work in tandem. Online is particularly important for product discovery, but the final purchase still often happens in person, as Charlie was saying. Customers who arrive in store may have already decided on what they want. They're probably highly informed. And this sets the stage for a very different kind of journey. And finally, business silos are like kryptonite for customer experience. Processes that might have worked before might need to be redesigned from scratch if organizations are going to successfully deliver omni-channel experiences. And with that, I'd like to move on to our panel of experts to help us unpack these points and to share insights on how organizations can hit the bullseye in terms of great customer experience. With us today, we have Thabo Ramushu from Nestle, Tinyiko Mageza from V&A Waterfront, Kia Abbott from Shoprite, and Nancy Moodley from Nissan. Before we dive into the questions, I'd like to invite each of the panelists to share a little bit about themselves. Nancy, would you like to kick things off?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. So I'm the head of customer experience for Nissan South Africa, as well as I'm responsible for digital CRM. And I think from my side, I come from a background of brand strategy as well as product. So I have a very wide background on the automotive industry with 14 years of experience within automotive itself. So customer experience has been extremely transformational. It supports my passion. I'm very disruptive in my thinking. So it really helps with using my skills and a need for disruption to be focused in the right way to support the customer experience on a Nissan perspective. We're currently responsible for South Africa, as well as there's 42 other countries within Sub-Saharan Africa.
Great. Welcome, Nancy. It's fantastic to have you with us. Tinyiko, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Morning, Julia. Morning, everyone. My name is Tinyiko Mageza. I'm currently the Group Marketing Executive for the V&A Waterfront in Cape Town. However, my background has always been firmly anchored in marketing, but I've worked across a number of different industries, primarily FMCG and financial services. I'm passionate about building brands. I'm passionate about creating experiences, and I guess I'm passionate about storytelling, and I guess it's the combination of those two things that led me to my current role, which I'm equally passionate about. And I have a very unusual one, not as, what's the word? Not as singular or straightforward, and perhaps in this conversation, that'll be, that'll come to light. Yeah, but thank you for having me, and thanks for inviting me to the conversation.
Great. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here with us this morning. Thabo, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Thabo Ramushu. I'm a Category E business lead at Nestle. And essentially what that means is that I look after digital marketing and e-commerce activity. My role predominantly focuses on what we call the East and Southern African region. It's a total of 23 countries. And it's to really accelerate digital and e-commerce across the region. It's looking at the fundamental underlying technology that enables personalization at scale. It's working with multiple agencies and making sure that we are trying as best as we can to improve our customer experience across different touch points.
Great. Well, welcome. It's fantastic to have you with us this morning. And last but certainly not least, Kia, welcome. Could you share a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Julia, and hi to everybody here today. So I'm the rewards program manager for Shoprite and Checkers. But honestly, I've been in the role for, I think, 6 weeks. I just joined in September. And so it's been an absolutely wild ride. In week 3, we launched the Shoprite Rewards program, and we are climbing upwards of 3 million customers in the last 2 weeks. So it's been, I just strapped myself in and joined the wild ride. Previously, I was at Cape Union Mart with the group of brands for Cape Union Mart, which includes Poetry and Old Khaki and Kido and Fred & Miller. And I launched their rewards program and was the head of customer experience for the group. And my background is in consulting. So I've consulted for brand and innovation and general business consulting. And I think the common thread across my career has been customer. I think like a customer, and I think it's strangely in retail, it's more unusual than you would imagine that people actually think, what would a customer say? And so that's generally my question in any boardroom, is what would the customer want? What would they think? And then that married with a real passion for data and data-driven decision making. And so the reward space is my perfect home because it marries customer and data. And for the first time, I'm going to have the biggest set of customer data probably on the continent, as our rewards program just absolutely grows at this incredible pace. So yeah, I'm having the ride of a lifetime.
That's fantastic. Customer experience professionals love data. That's definitely a universal, I think, with pretty much everybody who works in this space. The more we can know about our customers, the better. Thank you all for joining us. This is going to be, I think, a fantastic conversation. So let's dive right in. I recently listened to a talk where a respected local customer experience leader lamented how omnichannel has become kind of a panacea and a catch-all for what is actually just good experience management across the entire customer journey. To a certain degree, I agree with this, but our research highlighted that there are often weak links between experiences and touch points. Where do you guys see that things most often fall apart? And Thabo, I'm going to ask you to kick off this question. Where do you see that things most often fall apart?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Julia. I think it's twofold. The first one would be data. I think it's very important for companies to have a single view of their consumer, and it's more challenging than it would appear. You'd need to merge offline data, online data, and any transactional data that you can get your hands on for your customer in a single point where you can actually do data augmentation and actually really start developing products and really communication that speaks to that individual customer. It's a huge challenge. And I think the second point there would be organizing yourself internally. So having the right people inside your organization that can focus on omnichannel and how you actually start to deliver communication that is personalized to your consumers, and also having the right agency partners. I think is somewhat of a big challenge. You have creative agencies who a majority of the time were traditional marketing agencies, so they did big above the line work, they did out of home work and radio, and now they suddenly need to merge with digital. I think we quite often hear people saying, we'll amplify this on digital. That's not the case anymore. It needs to be such a seamless integration between what a consumer experiences when they walk into a retail store, what they see above the line, and the interaction with the brand when they're coming through the online channels. It's a tough one. It's one where you have to seriously consider each and every single user journey and what communication and actions do you want the consumer to perform across those touch points.
Great, thank you. Tinyiko, what are you seeing, from kind of a V&A Waterfront perspective? So you're, in your role, you're very kind of zoned in on a particular set of in-person touch points. But where do you see that things maybe fall apart between the different touch points that are out there?
Yeah, so I think maybe I should start off just by unpacking the business model that is the V&A Waterfront. I would imagine a lot of the people on the call assume the waterfront is primarily retail led, but actually, I mean, we are a mixed-use development space. We're privately owned, but we actually run our business like a public space. So while there is a property development element that spans across retail, commercial, hospitality, hotels, attractions, residential, equally, we see ourselves as like a neighborhood. So when I'm asked to describe what my role is, I say my role is to market and to create experiences within a neighborhood. And I think Thabo touched on something that I'm observing, and I think it's very much to do with how you've got to kind of start from the inside out. The consumer and understanding the consumer really intimately is important, but what's equally important is what happens within your organization and how you create a culture of people who are passionate about your customer. I kind of consider it like internal experience, and also challenging your organizational model and your organizational design to be fit for purpose, to be fit for the type of experience and the consumer experience you're trying to create. And sadly, there's the potential for there to be a disjointedness in what the promise that you're creating outside externally to your customer or your consumer versus what's happening internally, where often organizations are very siloed. People are expected to deliver things in a very transactional way, whereas what's happening out there is agile, it's fluid, it's flexible, it's ever-changing. So the question is, how does your organizational design and the culture and the talent that you bring on board align to the promise and enable the promise that you're creating externally?
It's interesting that you bring up, organizational design and culture. I feel like over the last couple of years, as the customer experience profession has continued to mature and evolve, you just can't have a discussion about customer experience without talking about employee experience or stakeholder experience. So not necessarily just employees, but I really like how you referred to, kind of the stakeholder community at the V&A Waterfront as a neighborhood. I think that's a great way to think about it. Different sort of neighbors with different objectives and doing different things. What are some of the ways that you and your colleagues have been fostering the right culture and mindset?
I think so. I'm really lucky in the sense that my role in the business that I work for is very human-centered and human-orientated. And I saw that really surface and come to life, especially over the last few months with lockdown, where we really dialed up the level of communication that goes out to staff. And also seeing our staff members, myself included, as human beings with their own anxiety and their own fear of what's happening in the world versus like robots that are just expected to deliver and to keep going. So I mean, we're on a journey. However, ultimately, from a waterfront perspective, we've always seen staff as being core to the experience that happens on the property, because they become the ambassadors of the promise that we make. So. Yeah. The starting point is articulating has always been articulating our business purpose in a way that staff actually understand and buy into. And a well-articulated business purpose can be very stimulating and really inspiring. And it inspires people to take ownership of the promise that you're making. So that's why I consider myself a purpose-led marketer, because there's something about a well-articulated, powerful articulation of why your business exists that's actually really inspiring, and more than that, that kind of galvanizes action. If you always link back your interventions to why you exist and what your purpose is in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thabo brought up something really interesting around data, and I noticed that was the first thing, Thabo, that you mentioned. And I'm wondering how data can be used both to understand where the kind of customer experience potentially falls apart between different touch points, but also where data might be used to understand kind of how and where the employee experience maybe falls apart too, or where those things are linked. Does anybody want to jump in on that one?
I think I can take that. From an automotive industry perspective, it's quite different in the context of the fact that just as much as employees are the staff that are building these vehicles and are deploying the experiences out there, we're also customers and we utilizing our own vehicles. And to me, if we cannot show that customer value, that experience, that passion that we want every single customer out there to actually experience internally, how do you want the culture to actually change? Because each one of us are customers, firstly. And secondly, I think it's beyond just the impact of how the data is flowing internally and externally. It's about the seamlessness of that integration. What does the data from one channel to the other channel actually give to the internal customer as well, to actually deliver on that promise that we are putting out there? So for me, it's even from an automotive industry perspective, especially with Nissan, we've got franchise, we have the frontline. So it's not even just the OEM internal staff. It is actually our dealers out there. It's the frontliners, the people that actually are putting the face out there for Nissan. What do we deliver from an omni-channel, and the promise that we give, and the experience that can be amazing from technology perspective, to the offline element of your customer? So how do you upskill? How do you take an industry that's in there from 100 years old industry to actually change how we delivering and upskilling our dealer network to deliver that? So if we don't have a one integrated approach from OEM to the dealer, to the staff, to the utilizing the same information that gives you that the experience that an offline staff member can actually deliver, then it's broken. It's not seamless, and you actually defeating the purpose of that entire experience.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Remembering to understand that when you're thinking about omni-channel experiences, you may actually have multiple layers of omni-channel experiences. So you've got the omni-channel experience that the consumer needs, but then, in the context of Nissan, you've got also a B2B relationship. Tinyiko was talking about kind of, your other people in your neighborhood, your other neighbors, the other stakeholders. What kinds of omni-channel experiences might they need? And what's interesting about omni-channel experiences in general, and what's happened over the last couple of months, is that with COVID and the lockdowns, we saw like almost an overnight change in consumer behavior. So suddenly people weren't able to leave their homes, and they were interacting with brands online, and they were ordering online, and it was just this sudden rush and change of behavior that really was like overnight for businesses. Businesses had to react. And Kia, you and I have spoken about this before, how it really kind of shone a light on where maybe there were some problems with some experiences and things that maybe previously you could kind of like sweep under the rug. Now we're just kind of like in broad daylight for everybody to see. What do you think about the best ways to fix, kind of these broken omni-channel experiences, or just to ensure that they don't happen in the first place?
I think it touches on a number of the things that the panelists have already brought up. I think the answer is often that the experience happens at the front line. And so, you can have, omnichannel is not about designing a great website. Omnichannel is about executing that experience that you're promising on your website all the way through to what the customer experiences in store. And then importantly, the reverse logistics of that are equally important and incredibly difficult to get right. And I think, for me, that was our biggest challenge that we experienced during the COVID period, was that last mile logistics and reverse logistics. And so honestly, I think if anybody is in charge of omnichannel, it's the logistics team. And I think the other thing is that omnichannel isn't about delivering the same experience to all customers on all channels. It's really about kind of a personality. So, I'm the same me when I'm at work, but I act differently when I'm at home. But my personality is consistent. I'm not you would recognize me in both situations. And so the way that the customer interacts with you in the store will be different to how they engage with you on social media, but they want that consistency of personality. But in store, you expect an answer within 30 seconds, but they're totally happy with the fact that you close the doors at 5 p.m. On social media, those expectations are totally different. And so we really, ran into that hard at Cape Union Mart during the lockdown period, because the kinds of experiences that we had gotten really good at delivering in stores, you couldn't offer that in the same way on digital channels. And the pipeline that we had to deliver experiences was designed around being store first. And when that dynamic changed, and basically it felt like a sluice gate opened, and not just the whole dam, but 1,000 years of rubble got pushed down our pipeline. Every small kink in that pipeline just exploded. And yeah, it was a pressure test that I don't think any of the retailers in South Africa was ready for. And our kind of end-to-end omnichannel was designed at the scale that was reasonable for our market at the time. And when that multiplied by 10-fold overnight, I don't think anybody was really ready for it or had the systems in place to address that exponential growth that was needed by customers. And I think to answer the question about what do you do to fix that, honestly, my answer is always going to be the customer. You go to the customer and you ask them, what are your needs now? They are different to what your needs were last week, and talk to us about that. And be honest and transparent about what your business can and can't achieve, given changing circumstances and changing expectations. That doesn't mean promising everything to everybody overnight. It might mean that as a scaled retailer, you have to say, I'm sorry, guys, you're only going to get your order in 6 weeks. And that's very different to when you're a mom and pop shop. Like if you're delivering bamboo children's sunglasses, of course you can load up 100 pairs of sunglasses and jump in your car and go and solve all your customers' problems by delivering them by hand the next day with a loving note. But when you're doing that for 1 million customers, there isn't a way to solve that problem at scale in the way that satisfies customers' needs. And so the point around like consistent expectations and holding ourselves to the standard of Uber and Amazon, and also to the standard of Yafishare, is difficult when you're doing that at the kind of scale that the panelists on this conversation are doing. You can't do it with the kind of personal touch that we'd all love to execute, but really it's just not feasible when you're doing it times 1 million.
Yeah, especially if you're having to change kind of overnight, for sure. It's a really interesting point that you brought up about expectations being different through different channels. And I hadn't really ever thought about it that way, but I think you are so right in that. To the other panelists, what do you guys see in terms of customer expectations differing between different channels, and how have the organizations that you guys have worked for managed that? What kind of tips and advice do you have? Because I think that's a really key point.
I think I can start this one. There's several things that Kia mentioned that really rang a bell with me, and the one of them is the expectation, meeting customer expectations is something that is extremely difficult, particularly when you're managing multiple channels. One of the ways that I found that works really well is when you sort of consider where the customer is in their consumer experience journey, and how you can try to mitigate some of the frustrations that they have. I mean, one of the things that we constantly deal with in FMCG is you're trying to sell online, you're trying to build a behavior of purchasing online. And yes, COVID did help us accelerate that, but how do you maintain that? So we have the fortunate foresight of seeing other markets that have gone ahead of us with COVID, how they've dealt with it, and how their customers have sort of adapted to the new reality. And some of those learnings happened before it broke in South Africa. So we were fortunate that we could almost get a head start in trying to plan for it. It's about constantly going back to your customer and saying, are we doing the right things? Where can we improve? How can we optimize some of the solutions that we have? Dealing with e-retailers, pure players and bricks and clicks is quite a challenge as well. So it's not necessarily just about getting your products listed. It's about looking at the ratings and reviews as well, and making sure that you actually taking that into account. Charlie mentioned early on when we opened a lot of customers prefer doing their research online before purchasing offline. That is true. So understanding that when a consumer does come online, what is their intent? Are they finding the right information about your products and your brands, or are they going to the right places? Where is the places that they're actually looking for information around your products? Is that the right information that they have? So it's constantly cross-checking with the customer and making sure that at every single stage, they are actually feeding back and saying to you, yes, you're doing the right thing. I really love the approach that you're taking. Or no, you could actually optimize this. And this is where my pain points or frustration points are.
Which is especially important if, you know, customers aren't doing kind of the whole journey exclusively online. If they're doing just a portion of it, the research portion of it up front, you know, you might not necessarily see that that's happening because it could be quite passive, but it's still a really important, you know, experience along the journey. I think we can't think about, you know, online customer journeys as a linear path that only happens online. If it's an e-commerce journey, it only happens online because, you know, our research said loud and clear that that's just not the case, that there are tons and tons of customers out there who are doing all of their research online. They're using social media for product discovery. They're doing everything up front, and then they go into the store to make the purchase. And I'm really curious to dive into this topic and ask Nancy about it, because I think that I guess, and I don't know, but I'm guessing that the automotive industry has possibly been a place where this has been happening for quite a long time, where you've got customers who will go and do a bunch of research ahead of time, and they are sort of these, you know, self-sold customers. So Nancy, have you guys, you know, been dealing with this phenomenon for a while? How do you cultivate self-sold customers?
So I think the one key element on automotive, obviously it's a high value product. So the human element of purchasing a vehicle versus purchasing something that's normal retail is very different. So I think, you know, if you look at the customer, you even though the online research is quite rife, and especially during COVID, we did, I deployed a number of shop at home tools during COVID, and we were very agile to do that. But again, the agility is one element, but can our dealers utilize those tools to support is another element. So because the vehicle is so high valued, the relationship between a dealer and a customer is also very important, because we anticipated that the physical element is actually something that is important to a customer. So for us, from our side, yes, we've rolled out a number of shop at home. Actually very proud of the shop at home tools that we've deployed, which is your virtual sales tools, for example, because you can still virtually contact your dealer. You can create a relationship. The challenge is you've got customers that are actually long-term loyal customers. What do you do on an omni-channel, on pre-sale, sales, and then retention is absolutely important. How do you manage that customer experience after they become your customer? Because those are the valued customers that you want to retain. And I think especially on a vehicle perspective, it's after sales. If we look at what we get from a customer complaints or customer care area, what are we doing with that insight to make sure that we're listening to the customers? It's easier for an automotive industry to listen to their customers than to have research for customers telling. They literally tell you this via their customer complaints. What are we doing to show them that we're listening and we're creating solutions that support? I think from our side, it is it's an opportunity to look at the online as well as the physical and empathetic and human element, and make sure that it's a combined solution that gives them the ability to do virtual, but also to have the physical contact, even if it is virtual physical contact. The solutions that we are providing has to be to support that. But over and above that, just a point, mobility is changing. It's not about a car anymore. It's moving to the connectivity. It's moving to adding value to the customer that they didn't even know that they were aware of. Nissan America just launched a concierge service. you don't have to even own your vehicle in the future. You know, it is moving to artificial intelligence, taking that data, the intelligence of the customer, and then supporting them in a value add rather than just what the product actually offers. So we've got a long way to go, but it's moving very rapidly, and we got to change quite rapidly to take that information and insight to the level that it becomes intelligence, and the solution to most of your value adds. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I would also imagine that you have different kinds of journeys too. I mean, you don't just have one customer journey. You probably have customers who are, you know, wanting to have kind of the classic car buying in-person experience, and those who want to do part of it in a hybrid way, and then others who are, you know, looking for an experience that's largely digital. I mean, do you see different types of experiences in terms of how omni-channel they are?
Yes, very much so. I think one of the key things that during COVID has actually helped is to see how consumers react to these virtual solutions, because prior to COVID, you would physically go to a dealership. You would want to actually touch and feel your vehicle, and you want to do the test drive. Now you would like to do, I mean, most of the customers at this point from a virtual perspective would like to opt to do the virtual connectivity and still speak to somebody virtually, but have that interaction and have that engagement. You see that that engagement is important for something so high value. You cannot literally just move it aside. But there's various different consumers, especially in South Africa. I don't think we're going to quickly move from you know, a complete physical relationship to a virtual, especially with vehicles. And you want to make sure that you're retaining that relationship, the physical relationship, because that's what the human element creates. It's beyond just virtual. It creates the connection, which we shouldn't alleviate. But yes, we have multiple hybrid types of customers, and you need to actually ensure that every solution that you do put out there, what is that journey? How does it touch the various other points? One solution may have millions of different touch points within that and touch various different omni-channels. So when we develop something, even on a website, we do that. We create a multi-part initiative to see where's it touching, are we covering every touch point, how does it impact, and what is the value add that it provides across that, and is there something that we're missing, you know? So it's not about just deploying, it's about understanding that deployment.
Yeah, I guess opening this up to the other panelists too, what have been some of the learnings about the digital touchpoints that you're involved with that have come to light as a result of COVID and changing consumer behavior? Because, you know, we saw this kind of, the pendulum really shifted, and there was a lot of pressure on any touch point that is not in person, because people couldn't participate really in in-person touch points, except for maybe like the grocery store and the bank for a while. What were some of the learnings that you guys had during that time about the digital touchpoints that you were involved with for your customers?
I'm happy to jump in on that one. Specifically on the topic of customer journeys, I do think that what's been really pivotal for us is not just mapping out the customer journeys, but also taking it one step further and within each milestone in that journey, identifying what are the burning platforms for our customer base, like what are the moments that matter. Because the journey is just one aspect of it, but where the things that you assume are important to your customer may not actually be that important. You may assume, I mean, to put it crudely, our customer base spans across B2C as well as B2B. And I may assume that from a B2B perspective, sorting out, as a landlord, sorting out the aircon is the most important thing. But actually for them, it's simply like, just communicate with me. Tell me how quickly you're going to resolve the issue, or just let me know, or manage my expectations, as Kia said. Then, of course, as you mentioned, within COVID, things have kind of transformed, things have evolved. So the moments that matter within the COVID context may have shifted, and they did, because now I can't sort out your aircon, and actually you're working from home. So what matters within that milestone at that point in time? And again, what we found, it was communication. Just keep me updated, let me know that the property is still running. You know, do my lease terms change? Do my rental agreements change? Those became the burning moments that matter within the customer journey, whereas 6 months ago, it was literally the aircon is not working, or whatever the case may be. So I think most of the panelists have spoken about the importance of staying on the pulse, because people's burning platforms shift and change on any given day, and mapping out the customer journey is not enough. You've got to stay on the pulse of what is the thing that matters the most.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
good, Thabo.
No, go for it, Kia.
Yeah, I think this idea of the moments that matter is such a critical way of kind of describing this omni-channel journey, because the value equation for different channels is different. So, you know, things like time has become a very different part of that equation over the last 6 months. And, you know, it's been like such an important criteria for the success of 6060, the Checkers delivery app, that people want to have a consistently known delivery framework, that as much as, you know, maybe our competitors have got a broader range of products, not knowing that your toilet paper is going to arrive in 2 weeks, that's just not an acceptable equation. And you would prefer to have a known set being delivered to you in 60 minutes. And so, you know, price, money, consistency, availability, all of these things go into the equation of what customers want. And knowing what those things are that matter is different as, you know, as we've gone through this journey, and also on different channels. And I think, yeah, really paying attention to that has really been an important way to deliver value. And I think, yeah, I think as omnichannel, as you create that omnichannel experience, you might want to dial up one thing and downweight another, because you probably can't deliver all things to all people in the same way. It's just too expensive. And then obviously the price equation changes. And so you've got to figure out which of those levers customers are looking for from you across each of those different channels.
Can I add something to Kia? I think the point on our side is also, what do you do with that information? How do you share it internally? How do you make sure all of that insight is being seen across the multiple departments? Because you as customer experience really is the orchestrator of the rest of the organization, really. And if that insight is not being shared, it's not being distributed, how do you prioritize on what is important? What do we do as a company? And what do we actually utilize as quick wins versus doing too many things and not delivering on anything? So I think it is critical that data sharing, that information that you get, the insight, how is it channeled across the organization, and how do we prioritize and get an executive buy-in? I think it's critical, because firstly, you want the organization to understand that customer is the core. But the second part of it is you want to take a traditional organization and turn it on its head to reprioritize. So that is it's quite a tough position for any CXs, I guarantee you that, but it can be done.
Any tips? Oh, sorry, Thabo, go ahead.
Maybe the last one, Julia, is maybe some of the learnings that we've seen, particularly for FMCG. It's so important to bring new news to your consumers. And at times, the below-the-line activities are so critical, you know, sampling, getting the product into a consumer's hands, getting them to experience the product, and then hopefully going in store and making a purchase. That was completely scrapped out. So learning how to do virtual launches, which is something that was very interesting for us this year, is that we've trialed virtual launches for 2 product launches. and with great success. So what we saw is that, firstly, the reduction in cost. It was a third of the cost that you would normally pay to have this almost big launch with influencers and everyone and the media present at a specific location, etc. And you can also amplify or really get other people involved, because normally when you launch a product, it's very exclusive. It's only a few people there, and hopefully they tweet about it and you get to trend. But in this instance, everyone is involved. The consumers are involved. People can join in and watch in virtually and actually experience the product as well. And then I think the second and last point there is sampling, getting product into the hands of consumers. So normally you would rely on your below the line agency to sort of get you the critical mass reach and look at the cost per contact. Whereas now we're sort of looking at new models. So how do you partner with your Zulzis, your bottles, your Pick and Pairs online, etc., to sample and get your product into the hands of consumers in the comfort of their own home? How do you leverage the consumer data that you already have to sort of surprise and delight your consumer by sending a sample? You're launching a new product, you know they're really into a particular category, you're launching something new, here you go, try this out, let us know what you think about it. It's something that's worked exceptionally well this year in sort of delighting our consumers and adapting to the new norm.
Any tips or suggestions or ideas from the panel out there to the participants about customer listening and what's worked and hasn't for you guys during this time? I think understanding the data and listening to customers is something that's come up a number of times in this conversation, and I think people are always curious about how do we do that.
I think, and I'll take the one, I think for us, it's a little bit more easier, to be honest, because we have something called voice of customer at every dealership. So if a customer is at a dealership and has an issue with response time, with anything actually, they immediately have a tool, a digitized tool that they can actually utilize to connect with the OEM. So we do have all of that insight, and it just makes it very simple and easy. That's one element. And the second element is obviously social listening. We look at social listening at all times to understand what consumers are saying out there, and then react and ensure that there is a response, there is timely response. So, I mean, I think this is a major challenge for any organization to have a ear on every single customer voice. But there's multiple ways of actually making sure that that insight that you're getting is not just to resolve that current issue, but to use it to understand how do you change, how do you make, you eradicate that issue that comes up. You get a lot of common issues that are across multiple dealers and multiple consumers, and it's also competitors. You shouldn't be listening to just your own. What is the competitor voice of customer giving you? It's positive and negative. How do you analyze that? So social listening is extremely important.
And then just to close out, once you've got that data, it's about sharing it with the organization. So we have an audience question here. What tech stack are you seeing investment move to in terms of marketing and IT when it comes to the unification of data, and why? And Thabo, I thought maybe I'd pose this one to you. What are you seeing in terms of investment on this?
So this is part of my favorite part of my job is looking at the tech stack and how they all communicate. I think firstly from a buying media perspective, one needs to own that data. So don't leave it up to the responsibility of your media agency. Have your own stack and have your own agreements with the likes of Google, etc., and make sure that the pixel tracking and the cookie tracking that's available there is your own. Make sure that that's integrated into, we use Salesforce Marketing Cloud, which is a fantastic suite of products essentially to run all our CRM. And essentially what we do is we integrate the Google and cookie and pixel data that we're tracking from our Google DMP into Salesforce Marketing Cloud. We use offline data, we integrate that into Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So we're really trying to build the single view of your customer across many different touch points. So POS data that comes through from your retailers, how do we bring that into the Salesforce Marketing Cloud? And how do we then use that to augment and segment that data to start delivering personalization? So firstly, it's the ownership of the data. I think quite often people have data sitting with third-party agencies, and you rely on them to sort of help you filter through the data and help you segment that data. You need to own it. It needs to be your data. It needs to be sitting somewhere on a cloud server that is yours and not necessarily a third party or client's data stack.
Excellent. Well, some fantastic food for thought for organizations, and I suppose also there's upskilling with how to use this data and leverage it. Once we've got the data and we've sourced it and shared it, it's what do we then do with that? But we could probably have a whole other webinar just on that topic. So we'll save that one for another day. I would like to thank everyone who joined us today, and to our fantastic panel of experts, to all of you for sharing your insights today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been a great discussion. I'd also like to thank Charlie Stewart and Amanda Riki and their teams over at Rogerwilco and ovatoyou for the collaboration on the report that inspired this webinar. And if you've enjoyed this one, we've got 2 more webinars lined up in the coming days, one this afternoon and one tomorrow. So please feel free to join us if you're interested. And yeah, and the report itself will be available for download on all of our respective websites. So yeah, we're so pleased to have been able to create the report again this year, to share it, and to be able to include the voices and perspectives of the experts from within the the customer experience community from across industries.